Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The Democrat Socialists want you to know they are men and women of unyielding principle. That was the spin on the Sunday talk shows over the weekend, of course, as it pertains to classified documents in Biden's possession versus classified documents in Trump's possession. A good example of this, trying to make the distinction between the two, in the interest of damage control for Mr. 10%, the big guy, the current White House occupant. Dan Goldman is a Democrat socialist from New York. He was on Meet the Press and made sure to convey, so that we understand, he has a paradigm that he applies to both situations, and he has done so. And Joe Biden is exonerated, and President Trump is guilty.
You had an op-ed last year about the 45th president and the issues with classified material, and you laid out 4 factors you said prosecutors need to look at: intent to distribute, clear knowledge of importance, volume of the material, and whether or not investigators had been lied to. Is that the set of criteria you also think President Biden needs to be judged on?
It absolutely is, and I think if you go through those criteria in each one, they do not apply. We don't have any indication that President Biden knew about them. He certainly has demonstrated no intent to deceive or obstruct the government by keeping them, and that's in direct contrast to President Trump, who refused to cooperate, who refused to comply with a subpoena, and who ultimately forced the Department of Justice to execute a search warrant to retrieve the classified documents. When you look at this very clearly and you compare them, there is no comparison. Those 4 factors, I believe, apply to President Trump, and none of them apply to President Biden. And that is where we need to be centering this conversation.
Exactly. Stop paying attention to what's going on in Biden world and the documents that keep popping up at his house. Just focus on prosecuting Trump, because that's all that's appropriate here, based on that very thorough legal analysis you heard from the good representative. For more on this, pleased to be joined by Andy McCarthy. He's a former chief assistant U.S. attorney in Manhattan, contributing editor at National Review, author of the bestseller Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Andy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Morning. How are you?
Good. So you heard that in-depth review from Representative Goldman, and it's quite clear that Biden did nothing wrong and Trump did, and let's focus on Trump.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear Goldman, turn as political as he has, but I think wasn't he Schiff's counsel on the impeachment? So I guess
Sure.
It's not a surprise. Plus,
Exactly.
He's a New York Democrat, so even if he thinks differently, I don't think he'd be able to say any differently. So no, look, I think the problem here, everybody is comparing Trump and Biden when, the context here is Hillary Clinton. And my lawyer's Southern District of New York analysis of all this, for what it's worth, has been that after Clinton got a pass, if you were trying to build a case on Trump on the theory that he was so uniquely awful compared to Clinton that he should be prosecuted, even though she had a 4-year willful violation where the whole objective was to defeat the government laws about record keeping, and then she misled investigators. Her legal team colluded with the Justice Department to limit what the FBI could investigate, and she destroyed tens of thousands of government records when she knew they were relevant to investigations, including the Benghazi investigation. I think if you were going to prosecute Trump after all of that, you really had, it was uphill for the Justice Department. They couldn't afford for anything to go wrong. So, then coming out of left field, as it turns out, the President of the United States, the sitting one, is essentially guilty of the same offense that Trump is under investigation for. I just don't see how you can bring the case. You can quibble about. We don't know a lot about Biden's offense, including how those documents got there and how many times they were moved. There's a lot of unanswered questions about all that. But even if Goldman was right, and Trump was by degree worse, the fact is it's the same offense, and you can't rationalize charging Trump after you didn't charge Hillary.
Right. What was the point of the raid on Mar-a-Lago in the first place, knowing you had as you point out, the Hillary Clinton precedent, destroying evidence, for goodness sakes, and which is, by definition, obstructing justice. And if you didn't believe that you could, if that precedent is controlling effectively, then why put yourself in this position in the first place?
Yeah, well, I guess where I part company with you on that is my beef with Hillary Clinton is that she should have been charged.
Yeah,
and I don't believe that because she wasn't charged, we therefore never again can charge anyone else. Otherwise, why enforce the laws at all?
But
I think what you have to say is a profound mistake was made in not charging Clinton. But the reason Trump got a search warrant was because they tried for a year and a half to plead with him to turn the documents over, and then he flouted a grand jury subpoena, which you or I, if we provided false statements to a grand jury, we'd be prosecuted. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for Trump in that regard.
But aren't you suggesting that nobody's going to get prosecuted because of this Biden development?
I think it's because of the Biden development on top of the context that's set by Clinton. I think I could find. I might not be crazy about it because I think there's a lot of downsides to prosecuting Trump, not least, the fact that people in this country are on fire over the two-tiered justice system.
Right.
But if you could make an argument that, Trump committed something that anybody else would be prosecuted for, namely providing false evidence to a grand jury, I could at least indulge that. The problem is the underlying offense is a classified information offense, and they're clearly not going to prosecute Biden on that. So I don't see how you prosecute Trump.
Well, right, but then my point is to say then you're essentially concluding that Merrick Garland is making decisions based not on the rule of law, but based on politics.
Yeah, but if you had asked me that at the beginning, I would have said that as well. Look,
okay, fair enough.
Garland appointed a special counsel for Trump on, was it the 18th of November, 2 weeks after he found out what happened with Biden. And he should already have appointed a special counsel for Biden 2 years ago in connection with what they like to call the Hunter investigation, but what is actually, in terms of its relevance to the country, it's about, what did the Chinese think they were buying when they gave millions and millions of dollars to Joe Biden and his family.
Right.
That should have had a special counsel 2 years ago.
But when he left office, Biden was vice president, which he can't declassify any documents. But how did he get those documents in the first place? Did Obama give them to him? That's what I don't understand.
Well, he didn't need Obama. When he was vice president, he had access to classified information. And when he left the White House, he continued to have a security clearance. Okay. So, I don't think his access to classified information is troubling any more than if Trump simply had access to classified information and he was following the rules for, reviewing it and handling it, there would be no problem, right? So the issue is, how did the documents get? And I don't think they got to his Penn Biden office in Washington first. I think they must have gone to the office he had set up at the University of Pennsylvania first. And the other thing is, we already know he's got documents in at least two different locations in private homes, right? So what I also don't understand is, once you find out that that's a problem, why are we relying on his aides who don't have a security clearance to go through his stuff? If he's fully cooperating with the FBI, then why isn't the FBI at these locations looking for the stuff?
So something else too. You raised the point about when Merrick Garland knew about the classified documents being in his possession, which was pre-election, because of the disclosure and the ostensible turning over of these documents to the National Archives. So did Merrick Garland have a duty to disclose? We were so focused on Biden's duty to disclose, the lack of transparency there, or to the extent any members of the press knew. What about Merrick Garland?
Dan, I would have said no, because the Justice Department, generally speaking, doesn't talk about ongoing investigations, except in connection with the Trump search. He came out and gave a press conference. So, again, what I think you're underscoring is that the way these cases have been handled has been, two different qualities of justice. And, the people who always come out on the short end are the Republicans.
Yeah, and there was great effort made, including by Jamie Raskin and others, over the weekend to distinguish the Biden versus Trump case, as you heard from Goldman, the invocation of January 6th, and anything to misdirect away. But it seems to me that the best thing that could happen to Trump is for Merrick Garland to indict Trump and not prosecute Joe Biden. I mean, I'm talking about politically here. Politically, because then he gets to run against the Department of Justice. He doesn't have to run against DeSantis or, to some extent, even whoever the nominee for the Democrats are. You're going to have this be a referendum on the Department of Justice and this two-tier system of justice you're describing, and that is like populism center cut for Trump.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, the only thing that cuts against that is I thought all along the Democrats want to run against Trump because they're confident that they can beat him in a general election and they think he can win the nomination.
Right.
The question you have to ask if you're the Democrats is, do you want Trump running in that context where, the issue isn't necessarily then Trump, although he'll be, he obviously galvanizes turnout on the Democrat side. But the issue will be the two-tier justice system, which I think has people on fire in this country. Personally, I don't think Trump could win a national election again, but I wouldn't want to roll the dice on it.
Well, do you think these documents are going to ruin Biden's reelection bid?
Well, I think Biden's reelection bid ought to go by the wayside of its own weight, right? I mean, aside from the fact that he's not a good president, and he's kind of I think the documents to me are like the classified information iteration of the Biden we've seen for 50 years. He's just a screw up, and he'll be like an 82-year-old screw up in the next term. So I can't believe that we're in a situation where he's apt to be the nominee under the circumstances, and it could well be that we're hearing a lot of this stuff because the project to push him out of the way is already underway. But I don't know.
Speaking of the Biden Inc. portion of the program here, you mentioned the special counsel that should have been appointed long ago. There was an exchange between Ron Johnson and Chuck Todd on Meet the Press. Mm-hmm. Chuck Todd is trying to distinguish the Department of Justice investigation from congressional inquiries, suggesting that Johnson and Grassley in the Senate or Jim Comer in the House, that these investigations of Hunter Biden and the Biden family, although he leaves it to Hunter purposefully, they're illegitimate. They're just political because the Department of Justice is investigating. They will determine if there were any crimes committed. And as Chuck Todd, I think, soon to be famously said, there's no crime in making money off your family name.
Yeah, I think any fair-minded person who compared getting millions and millions of dollars from the Chinese to the Ukraine issue that they investigated Trump over would have to conclude that the national security problem, which the most profound problem the framers were worried about when they put the impeachment clause in the Constitution, was the possibility that a president who would wield all the awesome power that they crafted for the executive branch could be purchased by a foreign government and do the bidding of that government to the detriment of the American people. So it's got nothing to do with whether a crime was committed. The question is what did the Chinese think they were buying when they paid all that money to Biden? And that would be, if Biden was not the person in the crosshairs here, if it was any other Republican, including Trump, it would be the only story that Chuck Todd was talking about until articles of impeachment were filed. So I can't really take him too seriously. The importance of that issue is not whether there's grounds for criminal prosecution or not. It's a national security issue of what does a hostile anti-American communist regime think it bought when it paid millions of dollars to the Biden family. And it's not only a totally legitimate question. Anyone who tried to get a security clearance in an ordinary government position that required one with that in his or her background would never, ever get a security clearance.
He is Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney, Southern District of New York in Manhattan, contributing editor, National Review, author of the bestseller Ball of Collusion: The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Andy, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.
Thanks, you too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
This is Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com for Town Hall. Finally cornered by the media over a scandal the White House hid before the midterms, Joe Biden claimed that he takes security seriously for classified material. Just how seriously? After the Department of Justice disclosed that Biden had kept classified documents in his garage, Biden told the media that it was every bit as safe as his Corvette. The Corvette standard had until Thursday been applied by the media. After Merrick Garland appointed a special counsel and detailed how the White House had slow-rolled the news of Biden's violations of the Espionage Act, that standard began to change. Earlier reporting had been framed almost entirely around the usual Republicans pounce narrative. Afterward, media outlets began to grudgingly note that the scandal was at least the same class as the one hyped up about Donald Trump, and that Biden and his team had hid it until well after the midterms. That's not a Corvette standard. It's a political car wreck entirely of Biden's own making. I'm Ed Morrissey.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, for those considering careers in politics and policy.
Are you growing your manufacturing